my son-in-law has a restaurant. He has the Italian restaurant in town here, and I'm growing food for him. And he said, oh, I would like some Italian peppers, the nice little small red ones. And I searched all over to get seeds of this special Italian pepper, and some came from California, some came from other areas. And I got them and I germinated them, and none of them came up. And so I was really concerned, and I was disappointed that they are selling these seeds that are probably pretty old. And then I tried some other Italian seed companies, and these pepper seeds and tomato seeds are not allowed to be imported to the US for quite a while now. And there's all different reasons. But it just shows me the importance of saving seeds and having, developing what we have here for pure seed. And then the other scare that I had was when I was ordering seeds for this year, and I went on one particular site, was Johnny's in Maine, because I have a rolling, or Paradise Permaculture has a rolling high tunnel greenhouse, and we especially like some of the nice winter seeds they have. So they said they were totally closed to home growers and home gardeners for selling seed. And it's just like, I'm selling produce to the community, and these are you know, seeds I know that work. So I was kind of really nervous. And I ended up calling them and finding out that I could, since I am selling to the community, I could get seeds. But what about the local grower? And it's very difficult, as if some of you have tried to get seeds. So I luckily know Robin, who has, she's our first speaker today, who has the Good Seed Company up in Kalispell, Whitefish area, and her seeds are phenomenal. And she'll talk a little bit about her seeds, but the importance of us being independent too. Okay, so I'm ready to introduce Robin. Paradise Permaculture is so excited to be connected with her because of her knowledge and the support that she gives us all. And Robin, I'm going to let you tell a little bit about your credentials. And Robin's going to speak first. We'll have a question and answer after that. And then we have a special person, Patti Armbrister, came all the way down from Glasgow. I can say Glasgow. She's outside of Glasgow. And she gets to drive back in some snow, new snow. She'll be fine, she says. But anyway, so Patti's going to share about seed saving too, and question and answers after Patti. And then for the last half hour, 12 to 12:30, we're going to exchange seeds, and we're getting that ready for you now. And I'm really excited to see a lot of people brought seeds this year. We're growing every year, so it's wonderful. But I'd like to turn it over to Robin right now. Thank you, Robin, so much for being here and sharing. I know everyone's going to enjoy it. So welcome.
Hi to everybody. Happy to be here. I can't really see anyone, but trust you're all there. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen. And then I'm going to go here.
Perfect.
All right. Well, okay, here we go. Let's see. I'm happy to be here. It's a little, I can't see anyone, so I just trust there's people there. I'm really delighted that you've all gathered at the Paradise Permaculture Institute. I'm going to give you a little background about me because it's relevant to today, and I have my own version of the experience that Mona just described, and it's going to drive today's conversation. So just very briefly, I am the owner of the Good Seed Company. It is a passion project for me, and it comes out of just a long-term focus of mine that started about 25 years ago, trying to understand what it is that makes us thrive physically as human beings, and what are the components that make a species resilient, because I'm particularly interested in how we as humans can learn to be resilient so that we can continue to exist into the future. I'm pretty sure the planet will survive no matter what happens down the road.
Hold on,
I'm
Robin.
less certain about us.
Here and tell it to us. Let's get out of this. So she's controlling me.
There we go. I think you're on now.
Okay, have you heard anything? What's going on?
We heard the first part. Well, kind of. Maybe start over because the speaker didn't. It shut off and we didn't realize it.
Okay, but you can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Well, hi everyone. Your day's going kind of like mine. This is my third computer with this presentation. So let's see how it goes. Okay, let's see. I'm the owner of the seed company. It's a passion project of mine. It stems from a 25-year exploration on my part about what makes us healthy as humans and how is it that any species on the planet, what constitutes resiliency as a species, because I am particularly interested in our future as humans. What I was saying is that I'm pretty sure the planet will survive no matter what disruptions show up. I'm less certain about us unless we pay more attention to the characteristics of resiliency. So I've done many things that desire to understand what makes us healthy and resilient has driven really pretty much everything I've done for the last 25 years. And part of that was coming across a gentleman, part of a deep exploration I started around 10 years ago, as many others have, on the interrelationship between the microbes and what makes microbes in the soil healthy and what makes the microbes in our gut healthy, and the relationship that the plants we eat plays in that dialogue between those very similar microbes and family members, if you will. I met a gentleman in northeastern Washington in the Okanagan Highlands who had been living off-grid with a small community where they had been growing their own food and had done the hard work of identifying plants that did well, food crops that did well where they grew, which is a very similar climate and geography to that where I live, which is in the northwest part of the state of Montana. And they had identified varieties, as I said, that were nourishing crops, and the plants and the fruits stored well and would make it through the winter, and had high quality genetics. And so those were the varieties that they grew for their own food. And of course they saved the seeds because they lived off grid. And then because seeds are so abundant, they developed an abundance of seed. And so they started to sell those seeds, and that was the Good Seed Company. By the time I met the last member of that community, his name was Harris Dunkelberger. He was 77, and he was just going to let the inventory and the company go. And I said, no, please let me take it, because I honestly had never come across such genetically vibrant seeds. And here was a group of people who'd done all the hard work to identify the seeds that would grow well for a community who wanted to build a seed bank. So I bought the company from him. I brought it to Montana. And my entire business plan was, I'll give the seeds to the local farmers. They'll grow them, and they'll save the seeds, and I'll find the seed savers in our community. And the seeds company's job will simply to bring these people together and help them clean the seeds and edify them through their stories on the back of the seed packets. And the seed company will be obsolete in a couple of years, and we'll have a seed bank and a community of seed growers, and everybody will live happily ever after. And it turns out that was just a story in my head, and the reality was quite different, because what I've learned over the last 8 or 9 years that I've had the company is that seed saving is it's a lost art. And the generalization I'm about to tell you is a generalization, and it may, there are exceptions to every generalization, but by and large, this is true. And what I've learned is, by and large, if you were under the age of 70, when you were growing up, chances are that you were not taught by an elder how to save seed. And by and large, if you were under the age of 50 when you were growing up, you were not taught by an elder in your community how to grow food. And when we don't have access to that information as kids, we don't have that reference point from that time when we just learn without question and that we can come back to as adults and apply the logic of adults to make choices on how to carry that work forward. So really the Good Seed Company is an education company, and we really have focused for the last 8 or so years on trying to reduce the barrier to entry for people so they can learn how to grow food and save seeds, so they can get back to the knowledge of saving and getting and growing, taking responsibility for their own food. So and that's became even more abundantly clear to me in the last month. Before I move off this page, I do want to say that I shared this story about my history because it informs, as I said, everything I do. And in addition to having the seed company, I am the current executive director of Arrow, which is on the bottom left of your screen. And it's an important organization that everyone should know about. It's the folks who started it back in 1974 were dedicated to trying to help build more sustainable communities in Montana in order to build a more sustainable Montana. And they have focused from the beginning on identifying the practices that are resilient for sustainable food growing, for sustainable food systems, and for alternatives to the fossil fuel-based economy that we have relied on up until now, and that is simply not sustainable into the future. That organization, those people, those elders who were young'uns back in the 70s, really built the foundation of the organizations and the institutions and the mindsets of folks around the state who are doing this work now in the 21st century. And Arrow's work now is really helping to connect all those people and all those organizations to do the next level of networking and help build sustainability at that next level. I really encourage you to participate. You can help link all these people doing excellent work around the state together, an example of which are the great folks at PPI. And the last thing I'll say is that Arrow has enhanced and elaborated on a local food directory called Abundant Montana. It is rapidly becoming a resource hub for all things related to local food, which is even more important today than ever before, as we've all experienced from the disruptions of the pandemic. It is endeavoring to be a local statewide resource that will, again, link and connect and support all the folks and the regional efforts around the state working to help build local food resiliency, local food system resiliency, and local food security for our Montana citizens. So check them out, support them, do all that good work. Okay, so I'm going to be quite directed and focused in this discussion today for the time we have together, and so I don't want to let this go to the end. For the particular discussion I'm going to have today, I've identified this list of documents and books. There are a tremendous number of resources out there by lots of fabulous people. And if I had to go to a desert island without internet, these are likely the items I'd pull from my bookshelf. On the left is this this is a free download if you from folks at the Seed Ambassadors, who now have Adaptive Seed Company in Oregon. Very, very well written, and it's free and it's thorough. Particularly for the topic that we are going to discuss today, I would, and really for enhancing your knowledge as being radically self-sufficient and independent in your food resourcing on your own land, I highly recommend Will Bonsel's book. It will cover everything you need to know. If you are new to understanding what makes healthy soil, this book, Grow Your Soil, is a great resource. If you want to take it to the next level, Nicole Masters' book, For the Love of Soil, is an excellent resource. So want to make sure you have that knowledge now. Okay, so here's the deal. A month ago, I gave a talk for the folks at PPI called Practical Guide to Seed Saving, and we stuffed a ton of information in a short period of time, and they recorded that presentation, and you can learn about all these pieces of information either from that recording or from the folks at PPI, because if you listen to the recording, 5 members of the organization took the time to share about their seed saving knowledge, and it's quite broad and it's quite knowledgeable. So what I want to communicate to everybody first and foremost is you have a community right where you are that is knowledgeable about seeds and is a resource for helping educate you on seed saving. So use them. For those of you who spoke at that the start of that event, own your knowledge, share your knowledge, be proud of that knowledge. Don't worry about what you don't know. It's okay. We're all learning all the time. But really take ownership of it and share it widely. It's so important. Okay. I will just say, apparently I have some emotional energy. I think I'm just tired. Got a lot going on. And I told you that this is seed saving. And the future of our species are both passion projects of mine. And apparently I have some feelings about that coming up today. So bear with me. Okay. So here's what happened. So usually when I give these talks, and I give them often, where I start with this picture because I think it's so profound. You know, what's at stake? So what's at stake is that in the last 100 years, we've lost 95% of our agricultural diversity. So, you know, that's pretty frightening. And the good news, though, is that we as humans created that diversity. And we ourselves have literally created the hundreds of thousands of varieties that we have enjoyed through the years and through the millennia. And so we have the capability to recreate that crop diversity. So, and the way you do it, the way we've done it, the way our ancestors have done it, is you simply dedicate yourself to selecting, saving, and sharing seeds. All 3 of those components are critical for building up diversity. And then I always say, because, so for example, we started with these seeds. That's what wild carrot looks like, wild corn, wild wheat. And you know what the modern varieties look like. We did that. So we have that knowledge. And even though most of us were not taught by our elders how to grow food or how to save seed, in our genetics, because our ancestors have been doing this for so many, many, many generations, that knowledge is in our DNA. And if we start growing our own food and saving our own seeds, we will remember from the knowledge in ourselves how to do this. So don't lose hope. And then I like to say that of the 3 things that are critical, selecting, saving, and sharing, I think sharing is the most important, because when you share seeds, you share the genetics, and it mixes up the genetics a little bit, and that's how you build biodiversity. And biodiversity is the best hedge against disruptive change. You need stable genetics in order to do that. So really you can only do this with open pollinated or heirloom seeds. So great. That's why seeds, you know, seeds used to be a currency back in the old days. They have been so valued. And the varieties that did well where we grew were valued by everybody who grew and saved their own seed. There's so many stories about that, and I'm not going to take the time to go there now. But here's what Will Bonsall says about the need to have biodiversity. He says genetic diversity is the hedge. I can't even read it, sorry. Sorry. But it's the hedge between basically being able to feed ourselves in global famine. So here's what happened between the month of January and today, a month later. I had my own version of what Mona described. In the last month, I finally was able to sit down and look at some of the seed catalogs that I typically look through. And, I told you that the seeds that we sell are the seeds, we sell 180 different varieties of vegetable, flower, and herb seeds. And I'm not interested in new varieties. I'm not interested in the latest and greatest. These are varieties of vegetable, flower, and herb seeds that do well here, and they're open pollinated, and you can save them. If you buy the seeds from our company and you grow them out, you can save them and you never have to buy seeds from us again. Really, my hope is that this company eventually can be obsolete. But in the last month, as I started to look through catalogs, I noticed 2 varieties of brassicas disappear from all the catalogs except Seed Savers Exchange for obvious reasons. Now, when I say they disappeared, I mean they're no longer in the catalogs. It's not that they're listed in the catalog and it says sold out for the season. It means they're not there. And that means that when the folks that created the catalog for the coming year went through the list of where they knew they were going to get seeds from, their farmer said, I'm not giving you that seeds. I don't have that seed anymore. And I don't plan to grow it again. So here's what happens when we have disruptions. And we had a doozy, right? We're still in it. We're still in the pandemic disruption. When you have disruption, particularly for farmers and for seed growers, you have a choice point of, do I grow that seed again or do I grow something else? Maybe something that's more financially viable or lucrative than this open pollinated small heirloom variety that really isn't all that popular in the grand scheme of things. So in addition to the pandemic, we had a loss of seed storage because there was such a demand on seeds. So we lost a lot of seeds, hence likely the reason Mona had got old seed. But in addition, for a number of possible reasons related to the pandemic, but probably related to climate change, we had a lot of crop failures. And brassica seeds that we rely on in our area tend to come from Northern California, and Northern California was impacted by wildfires last year. Maybe it was the wildfires, maybe it was other things, I don't know, but there were a lot of crop failures. And again, the seed varieties that we rely on for the seed company are not that popular generally, but they do well here. They're the one in particular that I'm thinking of is called early snowball cauliflower. It produces a beautiful white head of cauliflower, completely, as far as I've experienced, it's disease resistant and it's early. Like I get beautiful heads of cauliflower without question, without concern, without worrying about frost issues. And that's pretty phenomenal. But the other thing to know is that even though in an ideal scene, I might find early snowball cauliflower in a bunch of different seed catalogs that I rely on for seed, either as a seed company or a seed, a backyard grower, whoever I might be, chances are that that seed for these small niche varieties of heirloom open pollinated seed is probably grown by a total of 2, maybe 3 farms. There aren't that many people growing early snowball cauliflower. So if it's one farmer, and that's not unreasonable, if it's 2 farmers, and you have a crop failure, you've lost 50% of the seed crop. If it's one farmer, you've lost 100%. And brassicas are kind of a pain in the neck to grow. Now we get brassica seed from Northern California because they can grow, they're biennials and they can grow in the ground all year. I mean, you can leave them in the ground for the 2-year cycle, but there's still 2 years. It's a kind of a pain in the neck to grow. If I were a seed grower and I was just trying to, support my financial well-being, I might very well decide maybe I'll grow something else that doesn't take 2 years and that I could make more money from. If I'm going to grow cauliflower, maybe I'll grow those fancy purple ones or those fancy funky looking green ones that are now all the rage in the restaurants. Whatever, you know, rather than spend my time, my real estate, my energy just supporting a variety that's going to serve a small population, all of which is reasonable. But it's impacting my ability to serve and save seed for my community. So there are 3 varieties that are gone from the varieties from the seed catalogs this year. And to me, that's a huge, huge alarm. Okay, so I say we've got to step it up now. And it's fun, so please understand, seed saving really, once you get into it, it's fun. The folks at the PPI will tell you that, but it's also our responsibility. We have to be responsible for our own seed supply. It's not okay anymore to rely on the folks in California or the folks in Southeast part of the United States to provide all our seeds for us. We have to step it up. So I'm going to talk about, I'm asking you guys to step it up. You know, if you haven't saved anything, start by saving the flowers and herb seeds that are easy to save. The folks at PPI can show that to you. If you have already started seed saving, the easy stuff, then move on to the easy vegetables. Make an effort, do it together. Don't try to, I mean, go ahead and do it alone if you want, but it's easier to do with friends. And seed saving is a community effort. So get a buddy, do it together. It'll be fun. So here's a picture of the sulfur seeds that varieties that are super easy to grow. This means that they pollinate themselves, so you don't have to worry about cross-pollination. The only thing you need to worry about with what we call these starter vegetables is remembering that the plant is interested in reproducing, and so it has a timetable on when the seed is ripe that's relevant for the plant, and that's not necessarily the timetable that we're interested in if we're going to eat that the fruit of that plant. So the only one that where the seed is ripe, where we typically eat the fruit, is the tomato or the red pepper. All the others, we tend to, the beans and the peas, we tend to eat them when the seed is unripe. So you need to leave the beans and peas on the vine until the pod is dry and brown. Again, the folks at PPI can help you with that. Lettuces, which are also easy to grow for seed, you got to let them bolt. They're going to get big. They're going to take all summer to go to seed, but go ahead and do it anyways because they make a ton of seed, and it's really easy to do. Lots more information on that. If you want to talk to me about that, you're welcome to. And again, lots of resources on the internet and also from the folks at the Institute. So then the next level up are squashes and melons. These cross-pollinate, so you need to pay attention to hand pollinating them yourselves. And I've gone through that both in the practical guide I did last month and in other videos that you can find at Free the Seeds, or you can read them in those resource books I talked to you about. Very simply, the male and female plants are separated on the same vine. You want the female is the one with a little bulb below it. You need to be careful and make sure that when you are choosing to pollinate these varieties, you are opening the blossom for the first time, and taking the stamen and using it to pollinate the stigma. Just the key to pay attention to, the reason I point this is that these are insect pollinated by native bees, and native bees don't live in a honey, are not like honeybees and live in a hive. They just live out in the ground around wherever they are, and they will sleep in the blossoms. And so they'll be there cross-pollinating that blossom if it's already open before you get up in the morning. So you need to be the person that opens and closes that flower. Okay, but what I really want to talk to you about, I want to spend the rest of this time talking to you about how to save biennial seeds. They're a little bit tricky to do, and so we tend to avoid them, but apparently we got to step up and just do it anyways now. It's not impossible. It's not even that hard. It's just a little, you have to put a little more thought into it. So again, find a friend or three, do it together, and it can be an adventure. You know, it's the only way we'll learn. So there are two kinds of biennial seeds that we're going to look at. We're going to look at root crops. These are carrots, parsnips, and beets. And we're going to look at brassicas, technically really the cauliflowers, broccolis, and kales, but mostly the broccolis, cauliflowers, and Brussels sprouts if you wanted to do those. Okay, I'm just going to hit the highlights on what are the key things to think about here. So a biennial seed means that, give me 1 second here. I have to change something on my screen. I don't know why I can't seem to. I don't know what's going on. Okay, anyways. So biennial simply means that it makes the years in year two, excuse me. So the first year that plant is dedicating itself to just making either the leafy part of the plants, or in the case of root crops, it's putting all of its energy into that root and basically storing up that energy to then put into flower production the following year. Now, so you have to overwinter it and in Montana, that's a tricky thing. Most of these plants that are biennials are native to a climate where the ground didn't freeze. That's not true in Montana, so we have to do a workaround. So also the other thing to think about is many biennials cross-pollinate, so you're going to have to isolate them during the flowering season, which is year two. So that's something we'll figure out in year two. And then brassicas especially are subject to inbreeding depression, which means basically because they can self-pollinate or cross-pollinate. They do better if they cross-pollinate through insect. They're insect pollinated, basically, is the big thing. And so you want to grow them in blocks. And you also want to share seeds with your friends. And so we'll get into that in a minute, but that's a year two thing. So, okay, overwintering vernalization biennials in Montana. So vernalization simply means that the growing tip of the plant has to experience a period of cold in order to go from leaf production to flowering. So it has to think it's gone through a cold phase, and then spring, vernal means spring. And so think that spring comes out again. So again, if you think of brassicas are native to, the British Isle type climate, or the climate in southeastern part of the United States, coastal parts of Virginia or the Carolinas, where it gets cold, but the ground doesn't typically freeze. So you can still leave them in the ground. Certain varieties you can still leave in the ground in Montana, but there are considerations to do so. And so the other option is to pull them and store them through the winter, and we'll talk about that. But if you're going to do that, the real thing you need to do is you need to still select for the varieties you want to save. You need to stop leaf growth because it has to decide it's going to stop growing, and you need to minimize humidity fluctuations. Particularly for your carrots and for your root crops, they are storing a lot of water. They're a high percentage of water, and they need to not become dehydrated. We'll walk through that again. So on to selection, I just want to say this, that I'm going to talk about carrots in particular. Well, for seed saving, if you don't know this already, you want to pick your best varieties and save those for seed. They may be the most delicious looking ones and you want to eat them. But if your job is to save seed, those are the ones that have the qualities you want to save seed from. And with respect to carrots, I have it on good authority from Frank Morton that left to their own devices, carrots will tend to move back to a forked structure. And so if you want to maintain single a single root structure to your carrots, you need to pull the carrot and only save seeds from the ones that have the form that you like. Don't save seeds from forked carrots, because you will be just increasing the likelihood of more forked carrots down the road. And to stop the leaf growth, you want to actually, whether it's your beets or your carrots or any other root vegetable, you're going to cut off the leafy growth at the top of the root. Okay, let's move on. So, year one considerations, we're going to figure out how we overwinter the crops. For brassicas, you're gonna work with the seeds that you planted in the summer for, as if you were going to harvest them for the fall, but don't harvest them for food. For carrots and beets, you might have started your carrots in early spring, and even beets in early spring. But for the ones that you want to be overwintering, you're going to look for carrots that you've planted, or beets that you've planted in June time frame, because otherwise they tend to get too big and they may not store as well. So if you're going to, and then again, I said vigorous quality specimens. If you're going to store in ground, what you really want to be doing is you want to insulate the microclimate where the plants are, where the plant is growing before the ground freezes, because basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to keep the ground or the soil around your plant from freezing. And you can do it in Montana. I've done it successfully with carrots. And by the way, parsnips are just unbelievably super hardy. They will, I don't even know if they need mulches, but they make it through our winters just dandy. So I think it's because, I don't want to make up why. I have my stories, but who cares? They're super hardy. Carrots require a mulch, a good strong mulch. I have not succeeded in successfully, reliably having beets survive in the ground in Montana. Maybe others have. So I have saved those by pulling them and storing them. But I've been quite successful with carrots. I will say this last year, I had an issue with voles, and that was really disappointing. So that's a consideration. But here's the basic thing you need to do after a couple light frosts. Carrots and root crops tend to sweeten after the light frosts in the fall. So let them go ahead and do that before you put the dry mulch on. But go ahead and put on a thick layer of dry mulch, 12 to 16 inches. And dry mulch is straw or leaves, but not compost, not soil. You want thick, dry, insulating layer. And then hopefully we have years of good snow, and the snow makes an excellent insulator. I can't really say that that's going to be what happens in the future. I just don't even know. But, in the past, that's one of the values of our winter climates here in Montana. If you don't think you'll have snow, then you want to kind of you want to somehow keep that mulch on location so it doesn't get disturbed with winds. And so maybe put a row cover on it, maybe put a pallet on it, maybe put something on it to cover it. This gentleman in the picture, he lives in a more maritime climate with less reliable cold winter temperatures and more fluctuations than we have typically experienced in the past. And so he makes this cover. He makes a cage with a plastic cover, which provides even greater insulation, and he puts that over his dry mulch. And I might try that simply because I'm going to see if I can avoid the vole issue moving forward. But basically, that's what you're trying to do. So that's, if you want to try saving in the ground, those are the characteristics you want to think about. If you're going to pull the product and put it in storage, again, the key is to insulate against humidity change. And so the ideal storage is about 32 to 40 degrees, right? Imagine you were trying to recreate British Isle type climate or southeastern coastal climate, or, Northern California coastal climate, and pretty high humidity. Again, these are particularly for root vegetables. They're full of water, and you don't want to mess with that. So one way that works really well, this is the whole point about root cellars. They're big enough structure with a pretty steady state humidity environment, and or a basement that's unheated, or a shed. And you want to put them in damp soil or sand or wood shavings. And damp means they're wet, but not so, so that they're wet, but if you squeeze them, you don't get any water coming out. And then you just layer, if it's root crops, you're just layering your vegetables between layers of this damp material. And they're basically insulating and protecting the vegetable. For brassicas, if you just, obviously you're not burying the plant, but you are covering the roots, and you're leaving the heads exposed. There are lots of people who have suggested that you need to cut the heads back, the cauliflower heads back, so that you want to limit vegetative growth. I don't know if it's because we're cold enough here that I have not had that issue, but you could try cutting the heads back. You could try just leaving them whole. Just go ahead and try different things. Read Will Bonsel's book. He's got some really good suggestions. I will tell you that they will probably look pretty funky by the end of the season. The brassicas will, not necessarily your root crops, but your brassicas will probably look pretty funky. Don't worry about it. Put them back in the ground. These plants have been doing this for millennia. If there's 1 ounce of life in that plant, it will put out a shoot, it'll put out a root, it'll go to town. Its job is to make seeds. So just get it through the winter. Now, the refrigerators are tricky. And I'm not sure exactly why they're so different from walk-in coolers, but my story is that walk-in coolers, it has a big enough space, they're big enough that the humidity actually is better regulated than in a refrigerator. I have not been successful storing carrots through the winter yet in a refrigerator. They tend to, if I protect them against, basically your refrigerator is a big dehumidifier. It's just going to suck all the moisture out of your carrots or your beets. And so the tendency is to want to wrap them up in plastic. But then if there's any moisture on that plant, on that root, it will tend to mold. You'll get this white mold on it, and then literally it'll turn to soup by the time spring comes. I have spoken to a great carrot seed grower in North Dakota, and she wraps all of her carrots. She does save them in her refrigerator, and she wraps them all with damp burlap, and then she wraps that in plastic. And she's been successful in her refrigerators. They are big refrigerators, so I don't know if that's technically more like a root cellar or not, but I'll go ahead and give that a try just to see. And then there's there are questions on to wash, not to wash. I was trained not to wash, just like in this picture. These people just cut off the tops of their carrots. You can still see the dirt on them, wiped off the excess dirt and threw them in their bins. But to bear, here in the Flathead, successfully they barrel wash all their carrots, and then they put them in a plastic mesh burlap type bag and throw them in their walk-in. And I have taken 30-pound bags of their carrots at the end of spring and planted them and used those for seed saving. So there you go. That's variations in the rule. Yeah, that's just basically the considerations to think about. Okay, so moving on to year 2. So year 2, you want to isolate them to avoid cross-pollination issues. And so here's a picture of a little isolation cage we built for carrots that we were saving seeds from in year 2. Super easy to do. You can do this, this was small. This was a, 6 by 10 foot cage. And but you can make them much bigger. Just look at the pictures at Seed Savers Exchange, and you could do a whole row. And this is just insect netting. This is actually window screen, but you can use, you know, mosquito netting, and you just want to bury the edges under the soil so that you're just trying to avoid ready access for the flying insects. You know, if these are being grown outside in a field with lots of other plants, the insect is not going to spend a whole lot of time trying to get through that netting because there's so much else out there. You're just trying to protect your plants from those insects. If you are going to isolate with a cage, you want to provide a pollinator insect to the cage, and the easiest thing to do is literally the housefly larva or pupae. You buy them online, super cheap, super easy. You basically, and the reason you want pupae and not live flies is, or other insects, is that you don't want them to have touched bringing any other pollen from any other plant. So you put the pupae in the cage before they hatch. They hatch inside the cage, and this is all they have. And flies live about, I forget, 30 days or something, and you know, they're just bouncing around over all of your flowers, and everything gets pollinated in that time. And the reason you use flies is that they are non-specific, and they, as I said, they bounce over everything, and so everything will get pollinated. You can get species-specific insects that are specific to your crop variety, but that gets more expensive, and all you're trying to do is get pollen on your plants. So technically, they recommend that you put a little bucket of water and molasses and powdered milk in to start your flies off with some food until they get used to the plants. But I've tried it both with and without, and they don't seem to care. So if you don't want to do that extra effort, I don't think it's necessary, but it's basically a sugar supply for them while they get acclimated. If you are going to build a cage, make sure you figure out your watering before you put the cage on. It's much more difficult, and it's difficult to hand water once you've got a cage in place. So if you have to use irrigation, then use a drip irrigation, get that all organized before you build a cage. It's a pain in the neck otherwise. Let's see, last thing is you want to replant after the last frost, and then people have said different things about, again, the cauliflower head or cutting the beet shoulders off. Basically, you're trying to stimulate that plant to going on with its flower growing and seed production. I am not an expert at this, let's just be clear, but I haven't seen a tremendous amount of difference between cutting off the beet shoulders or not. So go play. What's going on? So, and then the last thing I'll say is that for brassicas, you want to bag the plant. Once you see the seed pods forming and one of them starts to turn brown, you want to bag that brassica plant to the best of your ability, and so that you can catch the seeds before the pods burst. You can either bag individual branches of the plant, you can bag the whole plant. But basically you're trying to catch the seeds because those pods will burst and then you will have lost the seed. Carrots and parsnips, the seeds stay attached to the seed head. You want to harvest those once the seed head turns brown, and the same thing with beets. I think that's it. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing if I can figure out how to do that. And gosh, I'm having real difficulty with my pointer. There we go. And open it up for questions because I know we're at just about the hour.
Okay. Can you hear me okay, Robin?
I can.
Thank you so much for all those details. I see there's a lot that I can be doing. Does anybody have a question here for Robin? And I'll just repeat it quickly. Okay.
She mentioned carrots, beets, parsnips, radishes.
Oh, you want to know about radishes?
As far as seed saving.
Yeah, what about radishes for seed saving?
Excellent question. So radishes, if you plant them early enough, like in April, and you plant them close together, you can actually get seed. You can get them to go to seed by, just leave them in the ground, plant them close together, leave them in the ground, rogue them once the radishes get basically fist size, so that the plants have some room to grow, and they will go to seed by September, and you can harvest in a single year.
Okay, great. Another question?
What
Anybody else?
about early planted broccoli in the greenhouse that you've already harvested, but it's still bolting?
Can you hear that, Robin?
Not really.
Early planted broccoli that's bolting and still in the greenhouse, and
It's flowering like crazy.
it's flowering like crazy.
Yeah. So you can save that seed. I don't know whether it's been exposed to other flowering plants, that it might be crossing with in your greenhouse, other brassicas. I don't know that answer. You do. I would then make sure if I save that seed, I would make sure to mix it. And I was positive, and I was not worried about cross pollination. I would then mix it with other brassicas, same variety seeds, and let those plants get insect pollinated the following year, so that you don't worry about inbreeding depression moving forward.
Okay.
Hopefully that was.
Okay, great. Yes, Megan.
So the inbreeding depression, are you just gonna get smaller and smaller crops? Are they more susceptible to disease? Why are we so concerned about the cross pollination?
So because it's literally forgive me if this feels whatever, but crude, but it is for the same reason humans don't procreate with their siblings or first cousins. It's like you just reduce the genetic viability of the product. So it's the same thing. So you want to basically be breeding outside the family. So just don't self-pollinate.
Okay. Other questions?
If you communicate, do you know about how far you would want to have them?
I didn't hear the question.
Okay. If you're not using a cage, how far apart would you put the plants?
So this is where friends come in handy. So if you're going to, for the brassicas, particularly for the brassicas, now remember, we normally eat the green part of the brassica, right? So if we're eating the broccoli, it's never going to go to flower. So go ahead and grow all those for food. But when you replant that brassica in the spring of year 2, just save one type of brassica at a time, and you should not have to worry about cross-pollination if you're the only, if you're only saving from one type in your garden. And the way you tell whether it's going to cross or not is look at the species name of on the Latin name of whatever variety you're working with. If the species names are different, they will not cross. And have your neighbor grow, or have your friend, not your next door neighbor, but have your friend someplace else grow a different variety. So they say half a mile to a mile is the other word. Because these are flying insects. Oh, one other thing, let me highlight one other thing. What I mean, what is meant by block growing versus in a row. So these are insect pollinated plants, and insects don't fly and pollinate in a long row. They flip back and forth to their neighbors to the left and right. So you really want to keep your plants in a square, if you will, or a circle near each other, because that's where the insects, that's how insects pollinate and visit plants. They don't go linear. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
What about the bigger part of the family, like canola?
Canola, bigger part of the family.
We worried about the cross-pollinating with them or not?
Cross-pollinating with them.
Pretty sure canola is a different species. But if it isn't, let's pretend it's not, then you want a cage.
Okay, and I was wondering about the carrots. The idea of digging them up and bringing them inside isn't too thrilling to me. What about if a straw bale or hay bale across the row would they survive the winter? Because I know you can.
Yeah, I've successfully, I mean, for up until I had my mole issue, I've successfully overwintered carrots in the ground. They just need really thick mulch.
Okay.
That's really the key.
Okay.
And snow.
Yeah, we like moisture for gardens. Okay, any other questions? Well, Robin, thank you so much. And I just want to say, Robin sent us some little packets of seeds. I have 7 of them, and we're going to, everyone picked a number as they came through the door, and we're going to auction them off. And I did save 1 packet for me because there's a lot of information in there, and I want to use it as an example. And Robin, you're so good at sharing. Would you be interested in sharing those little
Oh, yes.
information cards? Because
Sure.
what I can do is we can put them up on our website, and then people can go right there, and there are little folded cards that say how to save tomato seeds, how to save bean seeds, and they're just very simple and easy to use. So
I will do that right now so I don't forget.
okay, good. So if you don't get, if you leave a little disappointed because you don't get the grab bag, you'll find it on our website. So that's great. Patti came with Robin about 3 years ago, I think now, to one of our seed saving events. This is our annual seed saving event, the last Saturday of every January. You're really lucky you get 2 this year. So thank you, COVID, for something. And so Patti, I met her first time 3 years ago, and she's a wealth of knowledge, knows a lot about the soil, a lot about the beneficial insects. So here's Patti.
All right, thank you. I'm actually I'm a agricultural education teacher, but my background's all agriculture from the beginning. So as you can see by gray hair, I've got some experience going on here. But I'm really crazy about the soil and the beneficial insects, and helping other people be successful in growing plants that will be super nutritious, right? So it's one thing to grow it and you eat it and you're like, wow, that's pretty bland. That doesn't get me excited at all, right? To eat it and it's like knocks your socks off, that gets me excited because then I know the nutrition is there. And so I'm going to be taking a little different angle than Robin did here this morning. And I'm going to be hopefully helping you invite the beneficial insects, give them a place, and then they're going to help unfriend these pests for you. So we're going to start working with nature. And really, oh, how come that didn't go right when I thought it would go? Thought my advancer would work. So we want to become part of the whole.
You want to make it bigger?
There, how's that? A bit better. I was hoping my remote. Oh, it is working. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm also promoting that we grow food and stop growing grass. So this is my ex-lawn. This is my backyard food forest, to give you an idea of where I'm going to come from. That's a 16 by 16 high tunnel there. So we're going to reduce some of our control. I think humans really want a lot of control. But in order to be successful, we're going to have to embrace nature and let nature have some of that control back. Maybe most of it. So how can we help the beneficial insects? I need to move that band. I don't know if we can move that down or if that's just going to be part of the show.
Yeah, do you hit the more?
Hit the more. Oh, there we go. How's that? Okay, cool. All right. Isn't that cool?
Yeah. Nice shot.
Did you know she was a she?
No.
This is a queen bumblebee. And I teach everybody that I can get a hold of about the queen bumblebees because they're going to come out early in the spring. She's pregnant, just like a grizzly bear, and she hibernated all winter long, right? And what do you think she needs when she gets out of hibernation? Food, a reliable source of food. Super, super important, right? And super important that we don't disturb these great big queen bumblebees. They're going to be the size of the end of your finger, right? In June, we'll start seeing little bumblebees. Those are worker bees. They're her daughters. Oh, and now this doesn't want to run again. Oh, isn't this? Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, let's see how that goes. Hopefully that will work. All right, so I'm pretty sure everybody's heard or thinks, right, that we have a bee problem. Do you guys agree? We have a bee problem?
Like lack of bee,
The honeybees, the death of honeybees. Why are the bees dying? There's been millions and millions of dollars studying honeybees. Do you agree we have a bee problem? Are we? Yes, I can't see your face. Yes. Okay. I'm going to probably pitch the case that we've got some other problems. This is our lawn, right? And for some reason, ever since the pro golf thing started up here in America, we've decided we want to have this purest green lawn, right? When we do have that purest green lawn, we don't have any clovers, we don't have any diversity in that lawn, we don't have any dandelions, then we don't have food for these bees. So I'm going to be using a bumblebee because I have a better connection with them than a honeybee, and they're native. We want to be thinking native because we want native plants to help the native insects that are going to help us. So, yeah, they do anything they can do to get rid of those dandelions, include chemically destroy the place. This is more what it used to look like. This is some of the diversity of Montana's rangeland in the spring that native bee would have been enjoying, and they still do. They travel long distances. But they really do love the dandelions, and they're a great source of help for them. But I'm going to make the case that we have a management problem more than a bee problem. I think the bee is the messenger, and we're just not reading it very well as a nation. I think gardeners we are, but as a nation, we're probably not. Because we tend to do anything we can do to get rid of the dandelions, which my grandmother taught me to pull, and we ate and we embraced them in the spring. They were great nutrition and we needed them. But now we tend to destroy them. Not always just in the lawn either. As gardeners, we get a little crazy about control of which one we deem as a weed or not. Most of the plants we need that diversity. So I'm friends with Dr. Jonathan Lundgren, and I went to his research center 3 summers ago, did some volunteering there, and he believes if you want to save the bees, you need to save the soil. And I'm in that camp. I'm really into promoting regenerative agriculture. So what do the insects need to live? Turns out they need what we need: food, water, shelter, and air. And here's some of our beneficials that are, some of them are well known, some aren't so much, I guess, but they're what we're wanting as gardeners. The black wasp over here on the far corner, or my corner, I guess we'll talk about a little bit more in depth so that we can understand what's beneficial and what's not. So we want to always have food available. So I've even talked the landscaping crew at the school to not mow off the dandelions early in the spring. They can mow them off after the plums bloom. Once those plums bloom, there is plenty of nectar source for the bees. And I'm just using the bumblebee as an example because the others are with her. There's tremendous amounts of little tiny bees and flies and all kinds of pollinators. Just the bumblebee so easy to see. So once those plums bloom, then I give them the green light. Go ahead and mow the dandelions if you just have to, right? Because now they have another food source and a reliable one. So the next one that I have in our growing environments is chives. And you want a lot of them, right? We want masses of flowers, not just one here and there, because we're trying to draw in the whole insect world and give them a place and food and shelter. And so think of a lot, right? These are self-seeded. I just started with one plant, right? And they self-seeded in this little tiny crack. It's a 6-inch crack between my bed and my walkway. And so once those bees get done and flies get done pollinating, you can cut them off and they'll rebloom and give them even more food source. So they really, really like the chives. These seeds are plants that I'm promoting. I did bring seeds up to share with you today. So another beneficial plant that is habitat for beneficial insects is borage. It's the blue light colored one in the foreground, the little star on it. And when you taste it, they're all edible. It tastes like cucumbers. Kids just love it. It tastes just like a cucumber. The flower of the borage plants tastes like cucumber and super tasty. And borage draws in incredible numbers and diversity of beneficial insects. And all of us seem to have, how many's had problems with the cabbage looper or annihilating your Baracus family? Yeah. So the biggest thing that seems to have helped with that pest, because it's an imported pest, it's not a native pest. If it was a native pest, we would already had a beneficial wasp that would take care of it, but it's not. So we had to figure out ways to live with it. So a best practice I've discovered is to have taller flowers and a lot of flowers in the vicinity of those cabbages and broccoli and kale. And it really confuses that cabbage butterfly. It's almost entertaining to watch them because they're like, I can't figure out where it's at to go lay my egg. If she lays her egg on the wrong plant and not the cabbage or the broccoli or the kale, its larvae can't live. It's done. So she misses a lot. I haven't had, and when I do have the flowers planted right close to that whole family, I don't have problems with having them even lay on them, right? So if they don't lay on them, then the worms aren't hatching on them and they're not eating on them, not reproducing on them. This particular planting has the cabbage in the middle, potatoes on the outside edge there, and then borage is just intertwined. And as you see, there's some nasturtium down in there too. So think of diversity and lots of flowers. Another rock star that I use in the gardens is nicknamed Bee Friend. It's really Facilia. It's been adopted by the regenerative agriculture people. It's in the cover crops. It's a fantastic soil builder. And bees and every pollinator of all sizes. If you take a little tiny hand lens and look at that flower, there's itty bitty insects in there taking on nutrition from that plant. That is just amazing. And it's a cold season crop, comes in very, very fast. It's one of the first flowers that comes in after the native bushes and stuff. It's fantastic. It's intercropped here with our trailing nasturtium, which I'll talk quite a bit about here too. I brought seed for you on both these plants. Let's see. I don't know if you guys will be able to hear this. The buzz is the insects. There are so many of them that it's just unbelievable that it's just entertaining all by itself to just plant a few of these Facilia plants and let them have at it. And the structure of it is so intriguing and very nice. So that is what the seed looks like. Very prolific in seed production, and you can get the seed early in the summer even, and you can cut off the plant and it will rebloom in the fall, give you even more fall feed for your beneficials. I can't say enough about the plant. It's just unbelievable. And I like self-seeding plants. So I clicked off of this again. Okay, so we're moving into a greenhouse now setting, but I use these plants anywhere, in the high tunnel, in the greenhouse, in the garden beds. And this is Sweet Alyssum. And it's the old time Sweet Alyssum. You can save the seed off of it. It's not a hybrid. It's not been bred up, although there is lots of them out there that are. This is just plain old Sweet Alyssum. And I grow it by flats, and then transplant them into the rows that I want them to be in. You can treat it like a under canopy, or in this case, it's trellising off those beds. And what we do is, as soon as it comes up with its first bud to flower, we just cut it off with scissors. I do that a couple times, and it creates this huge bush, right? Because one little plant will turn into this big. But if you don't do that scissor cutting, you're going to have a little tiny plant, and it's going to go to seed really fast. You're trying to trick it into doing a mass seed production. So as we do, now it's created this mass nectar source for all kinds of little tiny insects that we can't even see that need nectar. And so think of different sizes and types of flower blossoms are key. Sweet Alyssum is going to be one of the food sources here for our black wasp that we're going to talk about in a minute. It also is used in this research project at in Northern California with Dr. Eric Brannon in his lettuce project. This is how we're getting organic lettuce in the store. Because you got to think of, in our own garden, we have enough problems with stuff attacking our lettuce. Imagine we plant a monocrop of it. How in the world are they getting it? Well, they're getting it by his research that he's done, and they're using one strip of Sweet Alyssum interplanted amongst the romaine lettuces. I think it's every 10th row. So I think it's 1/10 of the planting. I think he said he could even go down as low as 1/8 of or 8% of the planting. But it's not taking up that much space in the planting. But what it's doing is giving a nectar source for beneficial flies and stuff that will eat the aphids that get down in the heart of the romaine. He also has on the exterior of this field, I think this field is 40 or 60 acres of a monocrop. He has all the way around the outside your perennials and annuals that self-seed flowering plants of all kinds of fruit, bushes, natives, all kinds, all the way around, right? Because he has commercial ag all the way around him that's doing chemical spraying. And so that, we used to call them hedgerows, would be a place for those beneficial insects to harbor and live out their life cycle. So unfortunately, as gardeners and growers, we tend to interrupt that life cycle, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute, that we need to kind of try to stop doing that as often. Another thing we get into is overloving our plants with too much nitrogen, which is causing that plant to have to cycle nitrates through it and try. It's got to just work its way through that excess nitrogen that we accidentally sometimes put on. And when it does, it's causing insects to be able to digest the plant. So if that plant doesn't go through this up and down of that nitrogen cycle, then it's not gonna have digestible fluids, plant fluids for the insects, pests to attack. So when it does, insects are going to attack it because they can digest it. They also are going to attack because the plant has invited them. It's signaling, come in, attack me. And it's sending out all kinds of signals to get the pest to come and take care of its problem. So we need to back off the nitrogen idea and just, if our plants are green and doing fine, leave it alone, right? This pepper on the far side there, it was the only plants in the greenhouse this particular year that was getting attacked by aphids. So, but it's still a mass planting of peppers. You know, it was a 4-foot bed by 20, half full of peppers, and they were all getting attacked. But as soon as that plant could cycle that nitrogen through, get it more soluble, and then the plant becomes healthier, it stops sending signals for those aphids. And the aphid can't digest it when that happens too. And at the same time, the black wasp come in to the scene, which I don't know if this pointer works or not, but see the little brown cocoons on the leaf? Okay, so those are the black wasp have already laid their eggs in there. And one black wasp will take care of 200 aphids, right? Even though an aphid can reproduce really fast, so these black wasps can really take care of them quickly. So that's just a little story about that. We could do a whole session on just those two things, but we'll go on. Another thing we need to make sure that we're stopping the disturbance. And not only is destroying our soil health, but in our soil life, it's also causing problems with these life cycles and stuff with the insects. So this is the aphid and the digesting of the plant that I just was explaining. And so the signals are incredible with these plants. As soon as the plant is not got the nitrogen in it excess, then it's not able to be digested, and the signals change. They flip like a switch. I've seen a greenhouse go from, and it's a 96-foot long greenhouse, 30 by 96, full of aphids. I mean, it's aphid on top of aphid, where you can't even recognize one plant from another hardly. And you're just like, oh my God. The odors were like, I'm ready to quit. I'm like, no, we just need to relax. Things will get better, right? And so as soon as that nitrogen switched, and as soon as the black wasp started attacking, we went from trillions of aphids to no aphids in less than a week and a half. And the owners were calling me. I work at school. I couldn't answer the call. And he was finally texting me. He says, they're all gone. They're all gone. And I'm like, what is all gone? It's like the aphids. I was like, the aphids are all gone? I was just astounded. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And so it's just amazing. Once you let nature take its course, right? But nature has to get enough food supply to be able to call in the insect that's going to be able to take care of the problem. If we was continually washing these aphids off or using neem on them or all the other tricks, we wouldn't have got the black wasp to come in to clean this mess up. And they cleaned it up fast and efficiently. It's just amazing. So we got to think about insects that have chewing mouth parts, and then insects that pierce and suck. And they fall in these two different classes, and I'll share this with you. So polycrops and polyplantings really, really help in major ways. Here's in a high tunnel with the sweet alyssum underneath the tomatoes. And the sweet alyssum is just really giving the insects that can take care of aphids a place to live and eat, a habitat. Another plant that's just incredible at doing this is trailing nasturtium. I brought you some seed here to share today. And this plant doesn't even like extra fertilizer, doesn't need it, and it can trail in this greenhouse. It will trail 6 to 8, 10-foot long trails on it. That's one plant right there. Mm-hmm. And it will self-seed in a greenhouse too, where we just got to decide now where we don't want them, and we just take them out. In a garden, I can't get them to self-seed that well. I don't know why, because I'm not disturbing the soil, but you think it would. But anyhow, they one plant, I start them inside the greenhouse and put them in a deep cell and to get them started, and then strategically put them where I want them, because they're gonna help you control aphids, squash beetles, cucumber beetles, white flies, and the cabbage moths, just from having nasturtiums in the growing area. Now you do need the big ones though. I went to the school greenhouse one time and they were complaining about the aphids, and I'm like, well, do you have some nasturtium? Yeah, we've got nasturtium. I said, well, show it to me. Well, it was this one little plant, maybe a foot put around, and I'm like, no, that's not enough nasturtium. I mean, the aphids have annihilated it, you know, because they're drawn to the plant. The aphids are drawn to the plant, and so are the flea beetles. I didn't put flea beetles on here, but flea beetles are attracted to the nasturtium too. So if they're attracted to the nasturtium, you can strategically use the nasturtium to pull the flea beetles away from your kale, right? By thinking, what am I doing here? And so that you can draw them in, and they can withstand a major attack. Nasturtium, these trailing nasturtiums can. And if they kill the trailing nasturtium, I'm like, it was a sacrifice plant, right? My kale is still fine. So we got to be thinking a little bit that way. And so this is a plant that should be in every planting. If you have brachises, then you want to not have flea beetle problems. You still will have flea beetle problems, but you're not going to have them attacking your target crop as badly. So, and like I'm explaining in trap crop. Another key plant was not able to bring with me today because we really need to propagate it from root. It does have seeds, but I've only been successful in propagating from root. So if somebody wants some and they can get up on the Highline or anywhere close to me, or I can send it in mail even, I dig up roots for you and get it to you. But compost, I can't say enough about it, or the comfrey, I can't say enough about it. That we use it for composting. We use it for drop and chop. We use it for wheat tea. The beneficial insects just love it. And I've noticed the deeper rooted plants, even the horseradish, stuff like that, they just love, right? So I think they must know more than we know, that there's more nutrition in those types of plants and stuff. And so they really, really utilize it. You do have to be very, very careful where you plant it because it's going to be there forever. Right. So I encourage people to think about putting it in corners or under fruit trees, and not necessarily in your main growing bed because it will like it. And it's a magnet for bees. I like drawing in the bumblebees so well, you know, because they're native bees. They're taking care of native plants, and they do a fantastic job with the tomatoes and peppers and all of those plants. Use a lot of radishes for trap crops too, especially with the flea beetles and aphids. Both of them they're highly attracted to. And so I strategically put them where I want to draw them away from where I have my kale. The flea beetles seem to be getting worse worldwide. I think it's because the canola production worldwide. Canola is a magnet for it, and they just reproduce at alarming rates in there. So I don't know how many, everybody understand a flea beetle, or do you have flea beetles here? Maybe you don't. Yeah, you do? The little black flea looking ones that hop on your cabbages and broccoli and kale. Usually really show up in big numbers come July and August.
I haven't seen it.
Because you're lucky if you don't have a lot of them. So here's some suggestions that will really help you be successful. Flower succession. Very varied flower structures. Don't overbaby your plants, right? The stronger and healthier those plants are, the deeper rooted they are, the more they're going to be able to send out signals like to keep the insects away, the pest away. The more we baby them, and if we give them too much water, they get too shallow roots, they're calling in the pest insects. So we got to use them to work for us by us not overbabying them. Plant as much native as you possibly can. Leave the structure in the garden until spring. Now, I've been a speaker to a lot of big events and stuff. This is when people want to start taking me outside, and I can't possibly do that. Like, you need to start doing that because it's their home. It's where they're overwintering, and it's what they need to be able to survive. So when you clean it all the way off and take it away, I don't care if you are composting it, you've taken away the structure for their life cycle to be completed. So we've got to stop doing that. Think of it, if you drove across this country, you would be appalled at how clean it is, because we're not leaving any place for the insects, especially when we get through farm country. So here's a suggested list of plants that are fantastic at helping with your beneficials. And daisy family and the herbs, chives, are ones we haven't talked about. Violets, carrots going to seed, our clovers and fennel. And native grasses, I didn't put that on there, but Dr. Lundgren's latest research with some of his researchers, that they've took out the stomachs of, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of bees to figure out what they really are eating. And the number one food source at 60 to 70% was grass pollen. Grass pollen. And he's been studying bees his whole life. And he's like, wow, the more I know, the less I really do know. So I have a lot of bunch grasses in my growing environment, and I let them stay all winter long. I don't cut them down. They're giving you a good habitat for all kinds of ground beetles and stuff that will really eat a lot of bad bugs. Here's some perennials that I'd suggest if you could possibly put in a perennial exterior border or hedge or anything. The American plums are fantastic. They taste great. I have them right at the school, and the kids are eating them faster than we can possibly get them into the cafeteria. Your currants, chokecherries, blueberries in western Montana. I can't grow blueberries where I'm at, but we have service berries. Native sunflowers, I think they're the fourth sister in the Three Sisters planting, and all the native books that I've read, I'm pretty positive that's the case. You know, they had them all in their plantings, and they're just a magnet for bringing in pollinators of all shapes and sizes and kinds. That if you just want to get kids excited, you just get a sunflower in bloom and let them have a hand lens and start watching. It's just amazing. So I use branching ones to draw in the beneficial insects for miles around. Plus a pure garden that doesn't have any chemicals, right? So it's a place that they remember the good places to come, right? And they work off of memory. So they are going to come to my place time and time again and reproduce there just from having those big branching sunflowers. I don't plant hardly any single head sunflowers, but here's one example of a garden that I consult with. And so this is a regenerative garden. The mowed area is white Dutch clover, and she flood irrigates this garden with rainwater as best as they can. And then the branching sunflowers she's got on the exterior hedge for the western windbreak. Oh, I hope my power on my battery. Oh, this is set up with the power in. Acting weird. So she's got flowers all the way around the exterior of this garden because she doesn't have quite the 10% flowers on the inside of the garden, other than when she does let the white Dutch clover go to bloom. They have honeybees, and so they make some white Dutch clover honey that's just pure. It's so pure you see right through it. It's just amazing from having this clover in her garden. Every time she mows it, it releases nitrogen. Every time she mows it, she's putting more mulch onto the beds. This is another example of not overloving the plants. This is 2 4-foot by 16-foot growing beds. They're only raised by 6 inches tall. And I don't overwater them. I water them once a week, and I don't over fertilize. I do use compost extracts and worm castings, fish emulsion, stuff like that. Anywhere between 1 week to every 10 days. As my nutrient source, or actually is increasing my microbes on those plants to help protect it. And so as these plants get, the cabbage family anyhow, the kales and all those guys, as they get healthier, they're the ones where we can see it happen, right? But it's happening on all of our plants. You'll have to tell me if I'm getting long here, because we'll stop and ask questions. Okay. Yep. Okay. So these plants are going to tell you when they're at their peak of health. So you might know what that is. So they put out this waxy coat on the outside. You can see it on the leaves of these, just starting to get going. That waxy coat is them putting on an exterior layer of fat, right? That they are at the ultimate of health. when they start putting that waxy coat on. They'll put it on thicker and thicker as the season goes, as long as they haven't went through any major stress. A major stress will set them back, cause them not to be as healthy again, and they have to rebuild again. But I've seen it on sunflowers. I've seen all kinds of plants. Once I knew that was the trigger to look for, to know when plants are healthy and that I've done what I need to do, which was get out of the way and put on compost extracts every once in a while, right? And let the plants, the insects, the microbes do it. And so that waxy coat is a key indicator. There's our flea beetle, just in case you guys don't get to enjoy them. They love heat and sun, so out in the plains, they're a horrendous problem. They're in all the cover crops, they're in the canola fields. They are why they spray the pesticides on the canola so much. But they've figured out a way around that, so that's not working. That's why they have moved to the insecticide seed treatment called a neonicotinoid on the canola to try to combat the flea beetle. It's not working either. We've heard of neonicotinoid. Okay, so the seed treatment that we do not want anywhere, let alone it's everywhere. Unfortunately, in our bedding plants, and skip ahead because this is a couple-hour presentation. Try to get to maybe where I've got it. That's the life cycle. That's the black wasp that cleaned up that greenhouse. There's the intertwining of insects. They're all interrelated. This is in a cornfield. They call them a hairball, right? So when we decide, okay, I'm going to take out the aphid, I just took out everybody's life cycle was intertwined with the aphid. Everybody that was eating the aphid, all the things that we call beneficial insects need the aphid. That we need to leave the aphid alone. Let the plant put on its own defense and take care of the problem. There's the black wasp as it's come out of the cocoon. So the female black wasp lays one egg into one aphid, but she does 200 eggs. So she's killing 200 aphids, and her larvae is eating the aphid from the inside out. And then as soon as that one comes out, it's able to start killing more aphids, laying more eggs. I skipped through a bunch of this stuff here. So right here is where some of our neonicotinoids are being used, unfortunately, in the bedding plant industry, because they want to have a pristine product for us to buy. And so every greenhouse I go to, I ask them, are you using neonicotinoids? Well, within seconds, they're trying to get me off to a manager or owner, because usually the person you're on the floor has no idea. But they'll get you to somebody that does know, and then they're going to take you in a back room. They're like, well, we don't really want to be talking about this out in public, because it's a secret that's kind of in the country that we need to get out and open. I do not want them in my food source, but unfortunately, they don't stay with the plant. They were bred to stay with the plant. They were meant to stay with the plant because they're systemic. They're inside the plant, but they're traveling in the water, in the food, in the soil. And so they're not staying close to where they landed. They've even found them in white-tailed deer. Like, if they find them in one mammal, they could find them in another mammal. That we need to, as the public, demand that we don't want them, period. That they need to figure out different ways to grow without them. One kernel of corn with neonicotinoid on it can kill 365,000 honeybees. Yeah, we don't want that. There's our friend canola. You see, I'm an anti-canola person. Okay, so does anybody have any questions on some of the plants that we're using to? Yeah. Nasturtium?
Yeah. Can you still pick the flowers and use them eat the flowers, and the plant itself will still do its work?
Yes.
So you don't have to, you can pick those flowers.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. And they're edible, right? For those that you don't know, that they're kind of, I like to add them to salsa. They're hot, spicy. And but as far as to get them to go to seed production, I think they pop open, right? Because I see them forming seed all the time, but I don't always get it. Where that I think you actually need to put a bag over it or something to keep where that you can actually collect seed.
And when you say put a bag over it, is that a paper bag?
Well, they have these. They've been using these little trick jewelry bags. They're not very good for the environment, probably, but a lot of things we use aren't. And so they just slide them over the flower bloom after it's been pollinated, and it's got a drawstring that draws it shut.
Can you do
So
cotton?
I guess, but if it's getting wet and stuff, it probably wouldn't be good. These are air goes through them.
Yes.
So I've seen them in the organic growers that are saving seed for robin and stuff. They're using them on their tomatoes and peppers and stuff. So I think that would help on those seeds that want to fly, out, which nasturtium is one of those. Yes.
So the bedding plant,
Mm-hmm.
we call those bedding plants organic.
No, they would be non-organic. Yeah. And I've talked to our local greenhouse people, that are growing some vegetables, but majority of their business is all flowers. So it's not on the vegetables, but it is on the flowers. What are we planting the flowers for? For the insects and the pollinators. And that neonicotinoid is inside the plant cell. It's on every bit of nectar and pollen has the chemical in it. So no, we don't want them. We don't want them in the flowers. We don't want it at all. And the research has proven that it isn't even an economic sound decision to be using it, let alone we don't want it in the environment. But that's a bigger issue than today. But just start asking. So we put pressure on the people that are growing that we don't want that. Yeah, that's what Dr. Lundgren says, because it travels. And so, if you got somebody that's got it on their cropland or even in their flower greenhouse and you're gardening a little ways from it, you're still having some exposure to it. Yeah, it's not good. Yes. No, it's a seed. It's usually a colored seed treatment. So it's predominantly used in corn and soybeans and now canola, but it's used on lots of other. I'm sure probably sugar beets too. I don't know, but it's in big ag. But these bedding plant people are big ag, right? So when we go to our greenhouse and buy our flower or whatever, it's been a plug that was started in these monster greenhouses that I showed you in the picture of the monocrop greenhouse, that it was all one variety in a major greenhouse that's growing that one plug. They call it a plug. And then they distribute them from there. And our local greenhouse growers can't get the employees to start their own seed to do it the way they used to do it. So they just buy the plugs now because they can't get employees to work. It's a big problem. We got lots of problems out there, but we can get the plants to do the work for us and us start saving our own seed and knowing which plants will self-seed, right? So other than the nasturtiums, I'm not having to plant any of these guys. I plant them once, then I don't disturb the area, and I've got them continuously then, which is the best way to save seed, is let nature do it, right? Then I just take out in the spring what I don't want, right? What sunflowers are growing that I don't want, what befriend, boards, whatever it is, I just pull it, put it in compost or drop and chop it, which is usually that's what I'm doing, is just dropping it, right? Giving it back to the soil and adding a mulch layer with it and not having to plant it. So the boards works best in a area where I say, I want boards every single year, because you are going to have it there every single year. It self-seeds really, really well. It's another one that pops open. It's really hard to get seed collected, but I did get a bunch of it last year, so I brought some for you today. Any other questions?
I stepped away for a minute. Did you say anything about marigolds? Aren't they good in the garden?
I study a lot of people that are studying a lot of this stuff, and they think that's a myth, but that's just the researchers. I still grow them. And I do know that they do help with certain weeds, and they do help with nematodes, negative nematodes, right? The majority of the nematodes we want and are beneficial, but some nematodes we don't want, and they can help control the ones we don't want. Marigolds.
And then could you just tell us what your compost extracts are?
So my compost is extremely diverse. So I think that's one of the first keys, that when I make a compost batch, whether it's a cold one and I'm not turning it, or if it's a hot one I turn it, I prefer to get 40 different plants in it, some way or another, to get the diversity in there, right? I make sure I get the leaves from my community, right? That should have stayed in our community soils, but they're taking it to the dump or burning it, that it needs to stay here, right? So I compost that or make leaf mold out of it and use it or mulch with it. So they need to stay here. Nature put it here. Nature didn't want us to take it away, that it needs to go back. So they're a mainstay for it. And wood chips that our local arborist dumps on my place, and I let them age, but I also use fresh ones when I run out. So they're another main source for the bulk of the compost, because it takes quite a bit to get a little bit in the end. So I use that as part of my bulking materials. I am by a farmer that is more organically minded, and so I use old alfalfa that is in square bales that are breaking down, and sometimes it's black and nasty, and inside of it it's fine. In hot compost it goes. So I use that as a nitrogen source. So yeah, just making a really, really good compost is the base. And then fish emulsions, seaweed, kelp goes in. I use a lot of crab shells, mostly flea beetles. So we want to get more of those products into our environment. You know, you guys are in such a different environment because you got more moisture than we have. We've got your winds, but we don't have your moisture for a different growing zone. So we're more of a zone 3. Any other questions? I think the key to the compost extracts, I don't make teas anymore. I was trained by Dr. Elaine Ingham, but I don't make teas very often anymore. I mostly just am making an extract. So you're actually just extracting the microbes from your compost. And then I add in the humics and the fish and the kelp for food source for, yeah, it was running though, for the fungi. And then maybe a tiny, tiny dab of something sweet for the bacteria. But I use milk for that, right? So if I have excess milk, which always goes bad in my refrigerator, or sour cream or whatever, then dilute that, get it really well diluted, and then they spray it. They'll spray it out weekly. Sometimes they do that as a separate spray and not as with the extracts. But that's also going to help with your aphids and stuff, because it's going to bring in your beetles that are going to eat the aphids stuff. So that milk is a really good thing. It can go on the mulch, the soil, the plant, everything. Just highly dilute it.
This is so great. I hate to stop her.
Yep. Well, you're going to probably have to.
I'm going to have to.
Since we just keep going. So
we'll have Patti back again and give us more detail about the insects, and she knows a lot about soil. So maybe later this summer she can come back. So thank you, Patti.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.